My love letter to where I live. Really, this entire book is a love letter to the Inland Empire and the kind of dark, beautiful, creative place it is. It's simultaneously very destructive and creative. It's got all this industry, but it also has these farms tucked away, and kids get out there and they street race and they go to punk rock shows, and it's all kind of beautiful, but it's all kind of eroding to the people that live there as well. And so much of this book is set there, and this end chapter kind of pulls it all together and draws together kind of a story that I've been telling throughout here, and it features my friend Kaylee that I told you guys about earlier, as do many poems in this book. You'll see her again here. 1. In the dark cab of her fair lane, I said how all summer we broke windows for fun. The pavement still sighing with midnight heat, the witch glow of the dashboard lights in her hair, I whispered how the street races seemed to last forever. The screaming tires as mad and lonely as freight trains hissing and roaring through the night between empty lots and shops, shooting toward the grim Los Angeles skyline, the buildings like the slats in some great fence, a barrier we were not fast enough to cross. She was leaning backwards in her seat, head cocked, the firm white line of her neck plunging down her cotton dress, the suggestion of her stomach flat under the material, cotton catching muted moonlight. She dangled one hand outside, the cherry of her cigarette, a spark hovering inches from her thin fingers, a firefly suspended in space, a still pendulum of light and fire that grew bright and dim, spelled out codified certainties, a Morse code of a whispered scripture that would never be written down. In the car, I tell her how Joe Aguilera pulled saplings from the ground, his eyes glassing, predatory, his muscles shredding, his palms bleeding, how, on fire with angel dust, he'd walked down the island in the middle of the street and destroyed everything he could touch, howling machine laughter through grinding teeth. How, the next morning, he woke up screaming, some of his muscles worked off the bone by his own strength. Kaylee just leaned back in her seat, eyes out the window, hands restless at the top of her steering wheel, black nails fluttering toward midnight. I tell her how my mother used to read to me, her thin arms wrapped around me to reach the pages, the slow progression of her fingers tracing the words, me in her lap, the orange arc sodiums tracing the paper between the blinds because the lights were so low in the bedroom, her breath stirring the hair on the back of my neck. Good night, moon. Good night, clock. Good night, owl. I say the words too. I sing them under my breath. I feel her heartbeat fluttering beneath her gardenia-scented skin, a blood-filled metronome ticking against my shoulder. 2. On cloudless nights like these, the lights visible from the foothills, the darkness of the farms breaking on the never-ending warehouses, then against the greater blackness of our home, I can hear Kaylee's bones humming in her grave. One long note twining over and over, sighing between cemetery willows until it spills into my sleep, and I step out onto the porch and watch the smoke swirl up into the watery air, evaporating before it has escaped the halo of the street lamps. Here, the stars sometimes form a fractured, half-blind cosmology. I do not know their names. I have not tried to learn them. Mostly, if we disappear here, we disappear in cars. Mission Road winds dustily away into the flat amber knife edge of the horizon. The street signs shimmer green lies. Las Vegas, San Diego. The edges here curl inward, the circular logic of time and space, the lessons we learn in the boxy trailer portable classrooms, now demonstrable in how we never leave, but sometimes vanish completely into folded metal of crashed cars. Two objects wanting to occupy the same space. Their matter intertwined, the safety glass and plastic pushed into skin and hair. But not Kaylee. She disappears into the mute hollow of a looped phone cord, her neck occupying the void. Back in school, our teacher showed us a looped strip of paper, how if we trace it with our fingertips, we could follow it forever without breaking contact. This is the shape of the universe, she says, her eyes bright in the slate sky that blazes through the window. In June, the birds sing all night. The street lamps are broken. The house settles and moans. There's honeysuckle outside, and it froths indoors through the windows. I run my palm flat across the stomach of a girl who never knew these people. Outside, a train is cutting through the night. a finger tracing in the darkness, but never lifting, moving through the silent hulks of buildings in the distance, of empty lots filled with orchard ghosts. It is a song from your car radio tuned between stations, the snap and hiss shaping into your elegy. Good night, Kaylee. Good night, factories. Good night, Los Angeles skyline. Good night, rabbits rustling back and forth in the hutch. Good night, ghost lights in your hair. Good night, Joe. Your shoulders too big for my arms to fit around. Good night, train. Good night, stars, pregnant with darkness and nonsense omens. Good night, clock, winding down, the seconds always growing longer. Good night, Mom, shadow traveling up the wall, growing thin. Good night, moon. Good night, owl. Good night. Good night.